Okay, good afternoon to those of you who are on the East Coast. Good morning to those of you in the Midwest, and good evening to those of you joining us from Asia. This is very, very exciting. My name is Dr. Jan Thomas. I am Director of International Education at Brookdale Community College, and we are delighted to welcome you to our program this afternoon. Our office is responsible for global programming on the Brookdale campus. And every 2 years, we focus on a particular theme that is the center of a variety of curricular and co-curricular activities that we present over a 2-year period. Our theme is Transcending Divisions, and we are blessed to have as part of our team Dr. Ashley Zamponia Krug, who is our faculty liaison, and she is the team leader who curates this wonderful programming that we are about to experience today. And I don't want to say much more in the way of introduction because I'd like to get to the program. So I will turn it over to Diditi Mitra to introduce our program this afternoon, and I think we'll have times for question and answers and comments and reflections after the brief presentation of our film. Professor Mitra?
Okay. You've never addressed me as that, Janice. You can call me Diditi, that's just fine. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Diditi Mitra. I teach in the sociology department at Brookdale, and welcome and thank you so much for showing up on a Friday afternoon, night, morning, various times. So it's much appreciated. So I'd like to begin by thanking Brookdale Community College for giving us the space, particularly the Global Citizenship Program and the International Education Center and the Sociology Department for their support of the program. So thank you so much. And I'd also like to thank next University of Minnesota's Global Program Alliance program to develop United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So the funding is coming from there. And this funding really has been crucial in seeing these films come to fruition. And so SDG funding is usually awarded to projects that align closely with the, one or more of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And there are 5 of them, namely things like, there are several, but some of them are reduced inequalities, gender equality, quality education, peace, justice, and strong institutions, as well as partnership for these goals. I think our project, among other things, but very clearly touches on the one about quality education. Because I think the films allow us to reach a wider audience than just academia, which matched with our goals as collaborators as well. Because I personally find that, researchers do a lot of work and then it gets sort of packed away in a library or in specialized articles, and it doesn't really see the light of day. Right. So it becomes really this exotic, esoteric knowledge that doesn't get that wider audience. So I think the films are a good way to broaden that, and we can bring it into the classroom. There are many films that are also others that are also in the making based on this project, which Shashwati can talk about later. But I think that that's really important, so it reaches the wider public, and where I think the 3 of us kind of match in terms of how we envision knowledge production. So just a little bit about Shashwati and Nida, excuse me. Shashwati Talukdar is known for her documentary fiction and experimental films, which have screened in festivals and galleries all over the world, including the Busan International Film Festival, Margaret Mead Festival, and the Whitney Biennial. Her work explores the intersection between history, memory, and narrative construction. She's a graduate of Jamia Millia Islamia in New Delhi, as well as Temple University in Philadelphia. She's taught at NYU, Arcadia, and Temple. She lives between Taiwan, India, and the United States, so truly transnational. She also writes plays and occasionally dabbles in more scholarly writing. So for updates, you can actually go to her website, shashwati.com. And her film company's name is 49.5 Pictures. So that's, I think, is easy to remember. So you can just type that in and it'll pop right up. Dr. Nida Sajid is an interdisciplinary scholar of South Asian studies and transnational feminism. She's an assistant professor in the Department of Asian and Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Minnesota in Twin Cities. She has previously taught at Rutgers University, University of Toronto, as well as in Amsterdam. Professor Sajid's work connects religious studies with the global histories of racialization to generate opportunities for an intercultural dialogue on race, caste, and gender. She also writes on human rights and religion from an intersectional perspective. In addition to teaching and research, Professor Sajid is actively involved in outreach programs to build strong intellectual and cultural ties with new immigrant communities in Minnesota and forge an innovative curriculum for community engagement at the university. As a publicly engaged scholar, she aims to address larger questions of transnational identities and the meaning of political citizenship in the present day world. And now a bit about the film and what the larger context is of all this. What you are about to see is 16 minutes of documentary. It's part of a larger research project on exploring Sikh family migration from Punjab, India, and to the US primarily, mostly. And this interest in this topic, it really goes back 20 years. It's rooted in my own dissertation work on immigrant Sikh drivers of yellow cabs in New York City, who dominated the New York City industry for roughly 2 decades, from like mid 1980s to like the early 2000s. And they were mostly from the rural areas of Punjab. And from there, my interest really, sparked in wondering about their social location in Punjab, which motivated them to immigrate, and their subsequent life trajectories post having made that decision to migrate. And historically, immigration studies in the United States has changed, and it is constantly changing. We see immigrants as like this blank slate. They're here, and what do we know from there onwards? But when immigrants come, they're bringing with them their own histories, their locations, their identities, the jobs they did, their family ties, their relations. And when they are moving, to someplace new, how is that new place also then interacting with their with their own history and sort of producing something new for them. And I think that has started to change. But when I did my dissertation, that was not something that people were talking about. And so just one, random day, 2007, I decided to pack my bags and just go to Punjab and visit Punjab. And I went into the villages where the people came from, not really knowing the language and reading anything at all at that time. And their stories that they were telling me here in New York City, suddenly came alive for me. It was like, oh, wow, this is what they were talking about. And their context came alive to me. And so that's where this interest stems from. And from there goes, to me learning Punjabi, going to the gurdwaras here. That's the sort of the brief story of it all, right? And now the larger project also is based on a combination of ethnographic and semi-structured interviews. I'm not going to talk about the methodology, but anybody has any specific questions later on, I can address that. So we made several trips. In 2014 was our first formal trip with Shashwati's team. And then 2017, also I made 2 more trips. 2017, the summer one also was with Shashwati's team as well, to document it visually. And just setting up the film and the stories of these women themselves, based on just a preliminary analysis. So the analysis is ongoing. I feel blessed to have a lot of data, but it's also overwhelming and daunting. So we're sort of sifting through everything at the moment. And based on that preliminary look, we find that there are several reasons that shape the Sikh women's views of immigration. Marriage as a reason to migrate. There were women who migrated as children who really didn't have a choice, to migrate or not. There were some who wanted to migrate to seek liberation or freedom, but there were also people who actually had no desire to migrate, right? So overall, what I think we're finding is that there's no grand narrative of immigration. No one story to be told. And the women really differ on account of many things: their rural urban background, their ages, their caste backgrounds, their work experience, their socioeconomic levels, etc. So a grand narrative is sort of, we find, is a little hard to find. And we also, I think, find that the women are not passive recipients of family decisions to migrate or not to migrate. They're very much actively engaged in making those decisions, right? Which I think is important to note. So the film that you are about to watch are extractions from that bunch of interviews that we did. Three women, two who live in Punjab, one in a rural area, one in a city, in Jalandhar, those who are from Punjab and from India, one in the city of Jalandhar, one in Begowal in the Doaba region of Punjab, and one, lives in the United States. And they differ along all of those factors that I mentioned. So I'm not going to take up much more of your time because I know you're all waiting to see the film. So I think we should get straight to it. So Ashley, if you would. Yeah, I'm going to turn my video off just for the film.
मेरा ख्याल 17 नहीं 18 नहीं इथों लंघदियां ने काम कर रहे हैं वो भी काम कर रहा है
आपके बच्चे कितने हैं?
4 बच्चे हैं,
4 बच्चे हैं
3 बेटी 1 बेटा।
और सभी तो बाहर नहीं है, सभी इधर है?
सभी इधर, हाँ जी। एक बेटी बड़ी बाहर है।
और लेकिन रहने के कभी सोचा
नहीं? रहने का नहीं सोचा।
क्योंकि आपका हस्बैंड वो कैलिफोर्निया में थे।
हाँ जी।
तो आपने कभी दिल
नहीं दिल नहीं किया। इन्ना हैवी नहीं सी, जानदा भी नहीं प्रोग्राम ते इन्हां ने भी कोई खास भी नहीं कीता, पर यही सी उदों थोड़ा जा गरीबी भी सी, हाथ टाइट सी, फिर यही सी भी चलो 2-4 थोड़े जे पैसे आ जाएंगे तो साडा काम चंगा चल जाएगा। इन्हां दा दिल हजे भी करदा किसे ले भी मैं जावां, पर मैं कि नहीं तुम जाना तो फिर चल जाओ, मैं नहीं जाना।
झगड़ा नहीं हुआ?
नहीं झगड़ा माड़ा मोटा तो फिर सारे घर च हुंदा, पर इस करके नहीं होया।
इस पे नहीं हुआ?
नहीं, इस पे नहीं होया भी ये कहन भी मैं जरूरी लैके जाना, मैं कहां नहीं जाना, इस करके नहीं कदी झगड़ा आया। उदां तां घर च मामूली झगड़े तो चलते ही रहिंदे सारियां दे घरां च, थोड़ी बहुती तो होंदी। 10 साल का पता भी नहीं लगा कदों निकल गया। हाँ जी।
सोडी साहब कह रहे थे कि तुसी आ जाओ, और आपने कहा कि आपने कभी दिल
नहीं दिल नहीं किया।
क्यों? थोड़ा पता है उसके बारे में, क्यों?
कोई खास भी नहीं वजह हैगी, पर ये सी बच्चे मेरियां बेटियां ने, मैं बाहर दूसरे देश च नहीं लेके जाना चाहती।
क्या होता अगर बेटियों को लेकर जाते तो?
वो नहीं पता क्या हुंदा, मेरा नहीं सी दिल करदा मैं बाहर जावां। इत्थे एक जना कमाउंदा, सारे जने असीं बैठ के खा लैंदे, उत्थे असीं सारे जने काम करांगे फिर खावांगे। थोड़े पैसे इन्हां ने भेजे, उत्थे अपने कोल तां ना रखे नहीं, इत्थे असीं सारा समान जो जमीन वगैरह या दुकान वगैरह लई, इन्हां आके उसे ते काम शुरू कर लिया।
यहाँ क्या मिला आपको जो कि लगता है कि वहाँ नहीं मिलता?
इत्थे सारे भैन भरावां दा प्यार मिलिया, ਮੇਰੇ ਸੱਸ ਸਹੁਰੇ ਦਾ ਪਿਆਰ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਮਿਲਿਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਮੈਂ ਸੇਵਾ ਕੀਤੀ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਵੀ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਮਾਪਿਆਂ ਕੋਲੋਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਇੰਨਾ ਪਿਆਰ ਮਿਲਿਆ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲੋਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਪਿਆਰ ਮਿਲਿਆ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਰਕੇ ਫਿਰ ਮੇਰਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿਲ ਕੀਤਾ। ਉਹ ਵੀ ਇੱਥੇ ਹੀ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ, ਉਹ ਬਾਹਰ ਗਏ ਆ 2-3 ਵਾਰੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਕੋਲ, ਪਰ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਬਾਹਰ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੋਈ ਹੈਗੀ, ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਹੀ ਰਵਾਂਗੇ। ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਇੱਥੇ ਹੀ ਰਹੇ। ਫਿਰ ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ, ਭਾਵੇਂ ਮੇਰਾ ਘਰ ਵੱਖਰਾ ਸੀ ਤਾਂ ਵੀ ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੋਲ ਹੀ ਰਹਿੰਦੀ ਸੀ। ਹਾਂਜੀ, 8 ਬੇਟੇ ਸੀ ਮੇਰੀ ਸੱਸ ਦੇ, ਤੇ 8 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਧੀ ਨਾਲੋਂ ਵੱਧ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਪਿਆਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਸੀ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਪਿਆਰ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਮਿਲਿਆ।
ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ।
सब बच्चे यहाँ के चले गए, मेरे देवर भी चला गया, दोनों देवर चले गए, उनके बच्चे भी चले गए। फिर ये एक बेटा मेरा रह गया था, ही इज़ नॉट इंटरेस्टेड, पर जो मेरी डॉटर इन लॉ थी शी इज़ वेरी मच इंटरेस्टेड। फिर उनका इस वजह से क्लैश रहता था। मैंने कहा फिर आप बाहर जाओ, अब वो अमेरिका में भी 2 ईयर्स हुए हैं। डेवलपमेंट तो है नहीं, पंजाब में तो कुछ नहीं है। यदि बच्चे ने यहाँ से बेंगलोर में जॉब करनी है या बॉम्बे में जाके जॉब करनी, दिल्ली में करनी है, तो आई थिंक दैट्स मच बेटर कि वो बाहर जाके कनाडा अमेरिका में जॉब करे, क्योंकि यहाँ के बेंगलोर सिटी के और दिल्ली के इतने हाई हैं कि जितना उसको पैकेज मिलेगा वो तो फिर हमारे से ही पैसे मंगवाएगा, फिर भी हमें ही वो बेयर करने पड़ेंगे, क्योंकि इतना ज़्यादा पैकेज मिलता नहीं है, खर्चे बहुत ज़्यादा है। पर वहाँ बच्चे मैंने देखे हैं कि अपने आप राइज कर जाते हैं मेहनत से और बना भी लेते हैं, चाहे उनका लोन पर ही बनता है पर उनका बन जाता है। यहाँ वो नहीं है प्रोविजन, दैट्स वाई बच्चे बाहर जाना पसंद करते हैं।
तो आपका कभी दिल गया क्या जाने में?
मैं तो गई हूँ, 2-3 बार गई हूँ, पर जैसे हम एज के हैं, जैसे मेरी अब 57 है, अब देखो बिना वहाँ काम के रहना तो बड़ा मुश्किल है। घर में बच्चे तो अपने में बिजी हैं, अब मुझे गाड़ी भी आनी चाहिए, सब कुछ आना चाहिए, तभी मैं वहाँ रह पाऊँगी, फिर मेरा दिल नहीं लगेगा, बोर होंगी। वहाँ तो ऐसे है नहीं, आप किसी के घर में जा भी नहीं सकते ऐसे, पहले फ़ोन पर ही बात करोगे फिर ही जाओगे ना। मैं गई हूँ 1-1 महीना लगा कर आई हूँ, अब बोर हो जाता बंदा।
वहाँ सेटल का कभी सोचा?
नहीं, वो नहीं सोचा, नहीं हमने नहीं। यंग एज में हो जाते अब मुश्किल लगता है।
बचपन में कभी सोचा, मतलब डिड यू वांट टू गो?
नो, नॉट एट ऑल। हमने सोचा ही नहीं था कभी बाहर जाने का, इवन कि मैंने कभी अपने बच्चों का नहीं सोचा था कि ये भी बाहर जाएंगे, नेवर नेवर। अब तो सारा कल्चर ही चेंज हो गया।
I came in 1983. He came to India in 1982. We got to meet each other, and then 1983 when he came, I got married to him, and then I accompanied him.
And your parents were okay with you leaving India, going abroad?
It wasn't that difficult because my older sister was already in USA.
I see.
So in fact, they were kind of happy that I was going to join my sisters. My sister won't be alone.
Did you get employed here right after?
I could not work right away. I did not have the employment authorization, so I had to wait for a couple of years, and then I started doing postdoctoral at Rutgers University.
And how long did you do that?
I did that for 1 year before we moved to Ohio, and I continued doing postdoctoral research there also for another couple of years. Then I had my kids, and I stopped working completely for a few years.
Right. How long did you stop working?
I stayed home for 8 years.
8 years.
Until my second one started going kindergarten.
And the 8 years that you took off from work, right? How did you make that decision to take off? Why you and not Sarmi?
So this was my project to raise my daughters into responsible citizens, and he had a stable job, and I knew he would be making more money than I would in academia. So I think this was a mutual decision that
Absolutely.
I would stay home.
And it was not a difficult decision. I mean, it looked like the right thing to do. And I think we never regretted it. We are very glad that we did that.
तो आप काम करती हैं?
हाँ, मैं बैंक मैनेजर हूँ अब।
कब से?
मैं 2006 से बनी हूँ, मतलब कि 1983 से जॉब में हूँ बैंक में, क्लैरिकल। हमारे प्रोफेशन में एवरी 3 इयर्स ट्रांसफ़र होनी है। अब हस्बैंड तो साथ में जाएंगे नहीं, तो इसलिए कोई नहीं जाता
क्यों नहीं जाते?
हस्बैंड थोड़ी अपना प्रोफेशन छोड़ेगा, लेडीज़ नहीं कमाती तो वो चली जाती हैं उनके हस्बैंड के साथ। साथ में कुछ फैमिली कल्चर भी ऐसा था, हमारे पंजाब में बहुत कम लड़कियां प्रमोशन लेती हैं, मेरे ही बैंक में। इसमें मुझे लगता है दूसरी मैं थी जो पंजाब में मैंने प्रमोशन ली है। जब मेरा बेटा बाहर डीएवी कॉलेज में पढ़ा, उसने छोटे ने कहा कि अब आपको प्रमोशन लेनी चाहिए, तब उन्होंने अपने पापा को मनाया, तब मैंने ली थी। फिर भी मैं अमृतसर डेली अप डाउन करती रही।
तो यहाँ आपने कभी काम करने का सोचा नहीं?
ਨਹੀਂ ਕੰਮ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਰਹੇ ਵੀ ਦੁਕਾਨ ਤੇ ਜਾ, ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਮੈਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਾਣਾ ਕੰਮ, ਇਸੇ ਕਰਕੇ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਗਈ।
क्यों?
ਮੈਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਨਾ, ਘਰ ਦਾ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਮਰਜ਼ੀ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਾਓ ਮੇਰੇ ਤੋਂ, ਬਾਹਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਨਾ। ਹਾਂਜੀ,
तो बाहर क्यों क्यों नहीं करना?
ਉਹ ਕੁਦਰਤੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਮੇਰੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਨੇਚਰ ਵੀ ਮੈਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਸੰਦ ਕਰਦੀ ਬਾਹਰ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਨਾ। ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਹੁਣ ਸਭ ਕੁਝ ਘਰ 'ਚ ਮਿਲਦਾ, ਮੈਂ ਕਿਉਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਾਂ।
तो मैट्रिक तक पढ़े आपने?
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਮੈਂ
और मदर की एजुकेशन कहाँ तक हुई?
ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ 2-3 ਕਲਾਸ ਪੜ੍ਹੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ।
फिर माँ काम नहीं की कभी?
ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਸੀ।
And were you working before you migrated?
Yes, I was doing research in Delhi University as a pool officer for CSIR.
How easy or difficult was a decision like that for you to end that and then come here without any career set prior to your migration?
It wasn't that difficult because I knew I had done pretty good in my field. I had publications in my field in the journals from USA. I had received a couple of awards also, Jawaharlal Nehru University Award and a gold medal in my research. So I believe in putting my whole heart into whatever I do. When I was doing my research, I worked very hard to deserve what I got.
तो आपने यहाँ MA तक की?
हाँ, मैंने एमए इकोनॉमिक्स की, इकोनॉमिक्स में डीएवी कॉलेज जलंधर से।
किस तरह का सपोर्ट मिला है जो कि लगाया कि सक्सेस पॉसिबल हुआ आपके लिए?
पेरेंट्स तो चाहते ही थे मैं जॉब करूँ। मेरी मदर इन लॉ बिल्कुल कोरी अनपढ़ थी, वो उनको ABC 1-2 भी नहीं आता था। उन्होंने कभी मुझे पढ़ने से नहीं रोका, पर उनको खुशी होती थी। ठीक है, घर का काम वो उन्होंने इतना बड़ा घर चलाना था, तो वो उन्होंने कहा कि आप सारे सबको डिवाइड कर दी ड्यूटी ना, वो तो करनी थी उनके हिसाब से। चाहे वो पढ़ी लिखी नहीं थी, वो इतनी इंटेलिजेंट थी कि वो हमारे चेहरे के भाव से समझ जाती थी कि हमारे मन में क्या चल रहा है। उन्होंने बड़ा कोऑपरेट किया, उन्होंने ऐसे कोऑपरेट किया, मेरे बच्चों को उन्होंने संभाला। देखो, ये सबसे बड़ी बात है। फिर मेरी मदर ने मेरे बच्चों को संभाला, मतलब कि कभी उनके पास तो कभी इधर। तो इन्होंने तो बहुत ही कोऑपरेट किया। मेरे हस्बैंड ने कभी नहीं टोका, कहीं ट्रेनिंग में जाने से नहीं टोका, कहीं आने जाने से नहीं टोका, कोई प्रमोशन लेने में तब तक ही इन्होंने मना किया जब तक बच्चे छोटे थे। उसके बाद इन्होंने भी नहीं कहा। अब मैंने प्रमोशन 2 ली हैं, तीसरी तो अब भी मैंने अपनी मर्जी से छोड़ी है, क्योंकि मेरे फादर लॉ अंदर ओल्ड हैं, इज़ वेरी मच ओल्ड, और मैं नहीं चाहती कि अब मैं घर छोड़ के कहीं दूर जाऊँ। दैट्स वाई।
And the 8 years that you took off from work, right? How did you make that decision to take off? Why you and not Sarmi?
This was my project to raise my daughters into responsible citizens, and he had a stable job, and I knew he would be making more money than I would in academia. So I think this was a mutual decision that
Absolutely.
I would stay home.
And it was not a difficult decision. I mean, it looked like the right thing to do, and I think we never regretted it. We are very glad that we did that.
And how old were you at the time when you got married?
I was 28.
And I was 30.
And 28 is a little late.
It
for
is
the
late,
Indian standards,
yes.
isn't it?
In fact, my parents were quite anxious that I get married. Since I was doing my PhD, I told them I'm not going to get married until I finish that. So I waited to finish my education before I went in for marriage.
And your marriage was arranged?
Yes.
Partially arranged. Our parents introduced us to each other, and then we met each other a few times, and then we were writing to each other for next 6 months. Then he proposed me over the phone 6 months later, and so it was partially arranged, and then it was up to us whether we accept it or not.
Yes, we were not pushed into it. I think we had the best of both worlds because we were not emotionally blinded by the dating process, and yet we had plenty of time to write long letters to each other and get to know each other. And so we felt that we were compatible, and that's how it went.
शादी हुई कैसे?
शादी मेरी लव मैरिज थी, ये सिख परिवार से, मैं हिंदू परिवार से, और हमारा 9 years का गैप है। मेरे फादर जनरल मैनेजर थे नवा ज़माना डेली न्यूज़पेपर नहीं है उसमें, और ये एडिटर थे, और मैं SD कॉलेज वुमेन वहाँ पढ़ती थी। वो धीरे धीरे करके अट्रैक्शन होगी।
तो घर में इस मामले में कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं आई?
आई थी, मेरे फादर नहीं थे मान रहे, उन्होंने बहुत डांटा बहुत ज़्यादा डांटा। वो कह रहे थे अब एज नहीं है, आप पहले अपना गोल पूरा करो फिर शादी करो। वो कॉमरेड थे, कम्युनिस्ट व्यू के थे। वो कह रहे थे वो वुमेन एम्पावरमेंट ही तभी हो सकती है जब हम बच्चों को, लड़कियों को पढ़ाए और उनके अपने आप कमाना शुरू करें। फिर बाद में मान गए वो, फिर हो गई शादी, बहुत अच्छे से लाइफ निकली है।
शादी हुई थी, उम्र क्या थी?
वो तो 19 साल।
19 साल।
हाँ जी।
अच्छा।
10 तक ਜਦੋਂ पढ़ाई करके हटे उदों नाल ही विआह हो गया।
तो शादी का सोचा किसने?
मेरे पापा ने।
पापा ने सोचा और आपने हाँ कर दी?
हाँ जी।
कभी सोचा कि ना कहीं?
नहीं,
क्यों?
उदों इन्ने साल च हो जाती सी बच्चों की शादी।
Last question. So if you have to think about your lives and the concept of success, do you think you have achieved it? What about you, Venu?
Yeah, I like to measure success by peace of mind, and I'm very content and, as he said, very thankful for everything that I have. Loving husband, nice kids who still want to come home when they have time off. So, and when it comes to material things, we are not very greedy. Yeah, we are happy with what we have, and we have more than what we need. So we want to give back to community because we have a lot of everything.
Yes.
तो आप जब बड़े हुए थे ना, पेरेंट्स ने क्या इमेजिन करके बड़ा किया आपको?
देखो फ्रेंकली,
लाइफ गोल क्या बताया?
हाँ, मेरे पेरेंट्स ने मेरे लिए तो IAS बनाना सोचा था। मैंने भी 21 years old में मैरिज कर ली, वो सपना उनका धरा का धरा रह गया इनके साथ। वो ये कह रहे थे कि आप वो गोल अचीव करो, पर इवन देन चलो मैंने आफ्टर मैरिज मैंने काफ़ी पढ़ाई की है। जो हमारे ना बैंक के पेपर होते हैं 11, वो मैंने क्लियर किए। उसकी वजह से मुझे 3 years की सीनियरिटी, 3 इंक्रीमेंट्स मिल गई। फिर मैंने 2006 में MBA बैंकिंग एंड फाइनेंस भी कर ली।
अगर आपसे पूछा जाए कि आपकी जिंदगी में सक्सेस मिली है कि नहीं आपको, कैसे जवाब देंगे आप?
मुझे मिली है सक्सेस।
अगर आपसे हम कहें कि जिस तरह से आप जब बड़े हो रहे थे तो जिंदगी कैसा होगा, सोचा था? क्या
नहीं
सोचा था उसके
नहीं,
बारे
ਇਹ ਕੁਛ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੋਚਿਆ ਸੀ ਉਦੋਂ ਤੱਕ, ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਗੱਲ ਦਾ ਪਤਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਸੀ। ਕੁਦਰਤ ਨੇ ਹੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ, ਪਰਮਾਤਮਾ ਨੇ ਇੰਨਾ ਕੁਛ ਦੇਤਾ ਵੀ ਮੈਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਸੋਚਿਆ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ ਕਦੀ ਵੀ ਮੈਂ ਇੰਨਾ ਕੁਛ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਮਿਲੇਗਾ। ਉਹ ਪਰਮਾਤਮਾ ਨੇ ਸਭ ਕੁਝ ਦਿੱਤਾ। ਹਾਂਜੀ।
So Shashwati, you may want to begin by telling us a little bit of the process and how you became interested in this project.
Okay, so I think the subtitles got chopped off a little in the bottom for everybody. Sorry for that. I don't know why Zoom is doing that. So sorry, and I hope it wasn't too opaque for you because of that. So to answer your question, Diditi, what had happened was I had done a film about mural paintings in a very important institution in my hometown, which is Dehradun, which is in the Western Himalayas. It's a small town. And a lot of these paintings seem to have so much to do with actually Sikh history. And as I was filming them and I was looking at these images, I was trying very hard to understand what it all meant and where this was all coming from. And I started delving more and more, not only into Sikh history, but also sort of started to get a sense of Punjabi migration into Garhwal, which is sort of the region where I come from. And I realized how much of Punjabi history has actually affected the place where I'm from. And I became very interested thereafter in that. And so I was very curious to actually go to Punjab and see for myself what was another way to understand the imagery that I was quite enthralled by in my hometown. And then, of course, then Diditi and I took a trip together, and it was just this completely different experience traveling with her. And it really sort of enriched me and my experience of the place in this incredible way, to travel with somebody who's a sociologist and who had spent an enormous amount of her career thinking about this region and the people from this region. And so my interest sort of shifted a little bit and became sort of more aligned in trying to understand what it was that I was seeing, and what I was seeing sort of the landscape, and why it looked the way it did, and how did people move through it, and what sort of formed its context. Because of course, I'd known of these research, and having lived in New York City, one encountered a lot of the cab drivers all the time and had these conversations. But to sort of start suddenly seeing it in this particular way was sort of was eye-opening. And so then when Nida brought up this project that we could all jointly do together, it just seemed such a perfect fit. So now actually all of these things that we're thinking about for many, many years has found an expression in this project that we've been doing together for a while now, and we probably will continue on doing it. So,
can you tell us a little bit about the other films that are
done
based on the material we've collected?
Yes. So so the material we ended up sort of gathering and interacting with had so many dimensions that it seemed like the best way to sort of deal with it was to just sort of honor that and look at different aspects of it. So, so what you're seeing is just a portion of the material we gathered, which is about the women and their what they have to say and what their experience is. And a lot of it was quite a revelation. Some of it's counterintuitive, and certainly doesn't sort of follow the narratives that we are sort of used to about who immigrants are, and where they come from and where they end up, or what they do, and even sort of what their attitudes might be. There's a mirror piece to this, which is actually with the husbands of the three women, because we have a lot of material with them as well, and that makes sort of a very interesting kind of companion piece to this one. And then we ended up being in a lot of places of worship, because that seemed to be a very kind of important space for several different reasons. And so there is an exploration of this sort of religious expression and a religious space and community life within that space. Then one of the things we also have is sort of like what you notice when you go to a new place that you don't come from is, of course, sort of the architecture. And Punjab, for some reasons, these, there's a perfectly good reason, or there's several good reasons why it's like this, is people at one point seem to have built these amazing water tanks in the shapes of things that they're fond of. So there would be like a giant airplane on a house, but it was a water tank, or a giant bird which was actually Guru Gobind Singh's falcon, and or a big soccer ball. And it's a very strange sort of architectural element in these houses. And of course, it's like sort of tied up with people migrating out, sending money back in to build these enormous houses with these enormous tanks. But it also has so much to do with the importance of water in the region and kind of the ecological story as it's unfolding, and has been over so many decades, because Punjab was also the place for the Green Revolution, which was when sort of modern techniques were introduced to India, and Punjab sort of became the sort of hotspot for that, and it was the reason for its prosperity, but also for the subsequent problems that have followed. So all of these things you can see it in the architecture of the place. So that's one of the things that we're exploring. And then and then what's really interesting of the visuality of Punjab is the amount of advertising you see for particularly English language classes and travel agents and people who help you to get various kinds of visas, whether it's for work or to go out to study. And all of this seems to be like really tied up with the story of immigration. And it all has a particular look, particular feel, and there are good reasons for that. And so that's another avenue that we wanted to explore. And then there is this entire side of immigration where there are all these people who choose not to immigrate, though it's their children might go, or they might go, or there's enough push and pull. And so it's a question they certainly do have to consider, and then they choose not to go. And that's a really interesting story too. So there were so many different dimensions to what there is to explore in the region. So there are many pieces to the puzzle that that are in the process of coming out.
Yeah, and I think that's where that the more we learn, the more we realize how much we don't know. The more there is to learn, and I think that's exciting. At the same time, it's also very, very overwhelming. So how do you tease things out and look at it closely and try to understand it, which I think is really interesting, and important. And I think kind of what those trips did, along with what Shashwati was saying, that, I saw the cabbies here. And then when seeing them there, it opened them up to me in a way that I actually didn't even understand until I went there. So have a deeper, closer look at their lives, and the context that they were talking about visually became sort of so overwhelming, which is, why I think working with the filmmaker really helped in bringing that closer to people who have no direct experience with that context. And the other thing that to pick up on, or maybe Nida can sort of take on from there and talk about her involvement, and then what kind of questions come to her as she's watching this and listening to this.
Hello, everyone. I feel a bit like a gate crasher in this project because these two were having too much fun. So I was like, I just need to join the party. So that has been probably one of the motivations. But I think what really pulled me to this project resonates with the theme of what Brookdale's initiative of transcending divisions, because we I'm pretty new to the American academia. I moved here in 2018, and I was like, the spaces that we occupy, be it academic or the institutions of higher education in the community, there's so many divisions between like what we do. And the moment I see a project like this, where you have a filmmaker, an independent filmmaker, and an academic working, I just felt, okay, I need to be part of this. And So that I think, and there are three things that really pull me to this project. One is its interdisciplinarity, and really like this kind of a radical interdisciplinarity between creative and a sociologist, so a creative filmmaker and a sociologist. The second was the element of collaboration, that how we can collaborate beyond not just within between disciplines, but institutions, and institutions in different parts of not just US, but between India and here and other parts of the world, just like Shashwati is in Taiwan. And then finally, I think it was the potential of the way it can make us rethink curriculum. And what was really interesting, and I should share this, that they have been making a lot of footage, and Shashwati and Diditi put together a small film of 5 minutes, I think, for my religion and society in South Asia course at University of Minnesota. And it was fascinating to see the students' reaction, because there are themes and issues that emerge in almost each of their films. Like, this is our first, I think, fully made, but there is a lot of other films in the pipeline. And it's the way these themes resonate across for students. So I have a lot of Somali students in my class, and I have a lot of Hmong immigrant students, and then they see these films and they completely relate, even though the context of these authentic voices, the work that they do in our classrooms has been really, really fascinating for me. So I guess that's a little bit about my involvement, but something that got me interested and excited, which is their field trip to Punjab. And I would really like to know this is something I keep asking, but it would be great if both Diditi and Shashwati could share a little bit more about their experience of being in Punjab, filming as two women who are not Sikh themselves, and a little bit about the process of interacting with a place which technically do not belong to. So the larger theme of our project is belonging, the question of belonging. So that would be something interesting for probably everyone to hear a little bit about your experiences.
Who wants to take this on? You want to go, Shashwati, or do you want me to start?
Why don't you go first? You're the one learning, you're the one with the Punjabi skills.
A little bit. I'm losing them because I don't do as much anymore. I hadn't gone to India from 1991 to 2006. So 15 years go by. And then I do this project, and I go to India in 2006, might as well go to Timbuktu, totally different place. And then 2007, I just decided to pick up my bags and go visit Punjab. I didn't know the language. I did not know what I was reading. I randomly contacted people at a university in Ludhiana. So people who live in Punjab know PAU, Punjab Agricultural University. And they said, oh yeah, sure, we can rent a room. And then I took buses and autos and went into the villages and hung out with people and met people, right? So that was just an introduction, I think. And it was, so there, I think I felt more sort of, in the context of belonging, feeling like this is naive American, kind of just picking up and going wherever, and not really understanding the space. And I would take the buses at like 9 p.m. was my cutoff. So I think there was a way in which I wasn't afraid, therefore. So it allowed me entree into spaces, and there was a curiosity of people of who I was. I think they wanted to know what I was doing there. And then when I was there for 7 days, and then when I went back in 2014, by then I had started, taking Punjabi classes in the Gurdwaras here in Jersey to read and write. I can understand better than I can speak, and and then the experience was very different, because I personally felt a little bit more integrated because I could read, those little things that we take for granted when we are part of a group, that we understand the conversation, we can read, which I didn't have in 2007. And then 2014, when I could do that, I started to feel a little gradually part of it, right? However, I don't know how I was perceived. I don't know that, right? Because I am Bengali, technically, I'm not Sikh. So as an outsider, and then we also look like, not only are we from other parts of India, we're also urban people in terms of our clothing, and how, and then when Shashwati went, we had like a whole film crew with equipment, etc. There was some curiosity as to who we were. So I think in some sense, being an outsider helped a little bit in opening up certain spaces where people were curious enough to talk to us. But comparing not just the trips to Punjab, but I was just thinking about this when I did my research with the cab drivers versus when I went into the gurdwaras here in Jersey, I have to say that access with the cab drivers was easier than access to the families at the gurdwaras. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. One is that when I was talking to the male cab drivers, they were primarily, although they were married, they were here by themselves. So I think, and there's a paper there somewhere that I will write about at some point, that being a woman kind of opened up a certain space for men where they wanted that interaction. I think that was helpful. Second thing was, we connected as immigrants. Third thing was, they also saw me as successful middle class individual, who has succeeded compared to them as cab drivers. So the class success they perceived. Now, when it came to going into the gurdwaras here, it was it required a lot of hours of hanging out, a lot of ethnographic time spent there before people would actually open up to me. Maybe, and I have to think about this a little bit more, maybe because of the space that it is, the temple space might be a little bit different. And because you have to have some facility with the language, which I was slowly developing, and my strategy was to start with the Punjabi classes to get to know people that way, because they're there for a specific purpose. So I think that was the difference. And then when we went to Punjab, as an outsider, my sense of belonging, how was I, and maybe Shashwati can speak more to this, while I realized that I don't feel like an outsider, but I realized that I am perceived as one, and how that played out in the interactions is something that I really have to think about a little bit more. But yeah, maybe Shashwati can pick up from there and share her insights.
Well, from the neighbor state, and grew up with hearing a lot of Punjabi being spoken, and a lot of Punjabi friends, both where I'm from and also Delhi, where I went to college and lived, so which is a fairly large population of Punjabis. But it's certainly a very different experience actually going to the state. And I think it's sort of a good and a bad thing that A, you're not Punjabi, and B, you're a woman, because sometimes being a woman, you're not so threatening, and therefore people will be actually more open to you. But sometimes some spaces will be closed off to you. And so the way sort of gender, class, and those things kind of work when you're in a space like that. It's you sort of don't blend in, and maybe you don't always want to, but what does happen is, just by sort of being there and just sort of interacting with the place, something or the other happens. And that's always valuable. I think one of the big problems that happens in most endeavors is sort of this like search for authenticity, and it seems to me that it's much more that's almost sort of the wrong question to ask. It becomes much more important to sort of try and understand what is it that you are doing in that space, and it's sort of much more about that that sort of like thread of communication rather than sort of what's sort of out there, because then you're sort of assuming that it's static, and it never is. So I don't know if I actually like answered anything, but that was sort of my sense of sort of after being there. And then I sort of also realized the value of like actually getting out of your out of your own little sort of space and your own little comfort zone, and and just going and taking a look as to like what's out there, because it'll always like surprise you. And also, you have things to give, and that place has things to give you.
Yeah, and I think that as you're talking, Shashwati, it sort of resonates, because what you're talking about, that our identities have also transformed in the process. I think that that those influences are have impacted the way we have developed as well, right? So these categories of Punjabi, Bengali, Delhiite, all of those, when we it starts to sort of be questioned, American, not American, whatever those boundaries are. It's about that communication and about that interaction and engagement, because I remember one of the village heads when I went to interview him, and then he introduced me to other people, and then every time somebody would come, which made me feel good, every time somebody would come, then, you can talk to her in Punjabi, she understands everything. You don't have to talk to her in Hindi. So there's a kind of space also given to us to be included, which I think it's that give and take, which I think is really important. So you don't show up being uppity, and you don't show up knowing, you show up as truly not knowing. And then people are willing to, they see that your interest is genuine, they are willing to give you the space and talk to you. I think maybe that is part of it. That I think is there. And as far as Punjab, generally, Shashwati and I have talked about this, generally is concerned, wherever we went, there was a sense of hospitality, which I think is likely more specific to that place. That we were never made to feel like outsiders. At the same time, being a woman, especially entering male spaces, there is information that you're not going to be able to extract. Which is just, even with my cab drivers, it's just true gender plays a role in what you can get and what you cannot get. So.
Yeah. But I think, one of the rewarding things was like actually like, because recently, like I've just been sort of looking at the conversations with the women is to like how many of the things were just so kind of counter to what one thinks, of what their stories will be like. For example, like I assumed that it's Punjab, it's probably way more patriarchal, so the women don't have agency, and it turns out they had quite a bit. And then the other sort of stereotypical notion one has, like, oh, everyone's like just dying to migrate because life is horrible wherever you're from. And that's not true. Like two of the women didn't want to migrate, like at all. and they're very, very different, and they come from different background, and it was very sort of powerful to encounter. I think everybody's stories, and it took a lot of my assumptions actually about rural women, about about people who haven't made the same choices like I have, as my choices. So that was kind of an interesting. I mean, just personally, I found that very, very fulfilling.
I think Janice has a question.
What do you
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much, Shashwati. Hope I am not mispronouncing your name, and Nita and Diditi. This is just amazing work and amazing collaboration. I'm curious how you came up with the title for this documentary.
No, I don't know. I think Nida can speak with.
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
You're putting me in a spot.
It was Nida's.
Because I think the full title of this project is Outbound in Mapping Racialized Borders of Belonging. So that's exactly what we were trying to figure out, that where the boundaries and the borders lie, both in terms, not just migration, but in terms of gender, class, caste. So there are all these questions about that where and how we are defining borders in our, so I guess that's, and also the question of racialization was something that was in the back of our mind, because 6 immigrants, and in US it's a minority, but a highly hyper visible minority. So we just were also thinking about the kind of, I had a specific incident of mass shooting in Midwest back of my mind when this was being done, that how, and coming from Minnesota and in 2020 and all that was happening in the wake of murder of George Floyd, that we really as occupying these in spaces of privilege of being in these universities, what are we doing, and what is, and really thinking and reflecting on what is the meaning of the work and research that we are doing if it doesn't have any impact in the community beyond your research universe. So that probably is, so the borders, I think I was thinking really in the kind of borders and boundaries that really divide us when we are doing our academic work. So that's really probably where it came from.
Thank you.
We can take questions, I think, and we can also integrate that with our conversations simultaneously. So if people have questions, you should start asking them, raise your hand, put it in the chat box. Because we can keep talking. We were just having so much fun. I think between Shashwati and myself, we pinched ourselves a few times. Are we working really? This is not work. This is just so much fun, I think. Raj has a question. Raj, go ahead.
Hey guys, this was wonderful. Awesome, DDP. I'm Dr. Raj Wesley, professor in the psychology department at Brookdale. I also advise the Global Citizenship Distinction Program. And some of my students are on this call. Very happy to see that. I just want to congratulate you guys for the wonderful job you have done. And I am from Kerala, South India. So I can't tell you that everything you guys were saying, I mean, I know it, I see it, but just to see it from the academic lens, from the research lens, was just so beautiful. So I really want to tell you that you came through so well. You did all this work, went there, and Diditi, hats off, learning Punjabi, living in America. That is amazing. Punjabi is not a very easy language to, many of us speak very fluent Hindi, but you know, the languages of, And I don't know if everyone who's on this call knows, India is so diverse, so diverse. Diditi is a Bengali from the Calcutta region. I'm from the southern tip of India, which is so different from, but there is something that ties us all together. But what besides commending for your work, I wrote a lot of things, but I just want to share one or two. As someone who is coming from South India, born in Kerala, but traveled all over India because my dad was in the army. So I did not study in Kerala per se. I studied in Delhi, Hyderabad, Bangalore, and all of that. But the process you described, I wrote the names of the three women, right? The one in the rural, in the urban, in New Jersey. I find that exactly to be the same, whether one is from Kerala or from Chennai or from Bangalore. My husband is from Mysore, Karnataka. So I've traveled to a lot of rural Karnataka and Kerala, and these things are happening. If you go to a village, there is someone who has a family in the US or in London or somewhere else. And I was so struck by the similarity of the things the women said, like, I didn't want to go, but I went. But if you just look at their own personalities, as women, we have so much to appreciate and be proud of. They had different levels of education, but the willingness to, venture out of your comfort zone, yet hanging on to your core culture, that speaks very close to me. So I wrote things like that I found a lot of similarity, and I believe that maybe across India. So using the six as they're like, I love the word, Nida, hyper visible. Is that what you said? I think that's what you said, right? Because of their turbans, everybody knows they are Sikhs. They have a lot of challenge. But the other thing I just wanted to ask you guys was, in the current political climate in the US for the past couple of years, what I have seen, I travel to India every year. I was there this summer, 3 months. I have noticed that the desire for people to give their girls in marriage to the men who live here, or for girls to even come to the US, is decreasing. I don't know if you have seen that or you agree with that. I traveled quite a lot, 4 or 5 states, and there were people asking me, do you know like a prospective groom? But they're like, no, not in America. Do you know someone in Bangalore? Do you know someone in Trivandrum? And I was like, why? No, we are not sending them to America anymore. So it's a little sad. It's a little disturbing. Do you want to address that? I mean, does that even fit into this conversation? I was just wondering, because you did focus on women in your presentation today. So as a fellow Indian, that was on the top of my mind.
Well, in terms of migration, I don't know how to answer that because I don't know. But I think migration stories in India cannot be taken as India. It has to be sorted out regionally, because the motivations and the histories of people leaving are very different. Punjab migration to North America was late 19th, early 20th century. And so I the different motivations, and I cannot speak to the India side of the story because that's really not my area of knowledge. My knowledge is really on this side of the border. But I haven't seen that. However, there are news reports of women from Punjab who are making interesting decisions to migrate, actually, as nurses, for example. So, but that is not something that I have investigated yet. Maybe the others can pick up on that.
Yeah, like Kerala, right? I'm sure you guys know a lot of women take up the nursing profession. They are in India. A lot of nursing is from Kerala across the world. So I definitely agree with that. As I said, India is so diverse, so the regional patterns may be different. But I just noticed that this year, last year. So I just wanted to ask you guys if it connects to anything you have seen.
If I can
Well,
just jump in,
there
because this is,
there are a
thank
couple
you.
of things. First of all, there is like
Yes, Shashwati, go ahead. You're muted.
yeah. Now, no, I unmuted. There are a couple of things. Well, first of all, there is a lot of sort of like, there's like sort of an aspect internal now, see, I'm not an academic, but there's a lot of internal migration, and like really, actually, that's what kind of drew me to Punjab, because, of course, the Punjabi and Sikh migration that drew me to Punjab is from the 18th century, when India really even wasn't particularly like the India as we know it today. However, the other thing, this is just all incidental, just based on just work that I've been doing, because some of the other work I've been doing is in a police station, in the women's helpline, and sort of looking at police women and how they and what they do and what happens to the women who are sort of coming to this and so on. Now, one of the big aspects of all of this is sort of the bonding foreign husband, or the husband who or the man who will sort of get a bride from India, and then she goes over there and gets ill-treated because they don't have the right visa, or there's domestic and she doesn't have access to support. That was one aspect of it. Or they get married, they go there and they find out that the husband's already married to somebody else or has a girlfriend or something or the other. And so there was like a lot of actually information around in the police station for this sort of thing. And I don't think it happens as much anymore like it used to back in the 70s and 80s. I think it sort of it was quite a problem. So I saw that a lot of people, just by sort of being in the police station, that too just in one place, I don't know what's happening, say in Tamil Nadu, which has a very different police force. There was like a big understanding of, you don't want to send your daughter that far away because, bad things happen. And you won't be able to do anything about it. So there's a big sort of sense of that.
Thanks.
Yeah. Nida, you wanted to jump in and
So,
then.
and I'm like, and of course.
No, I just wanted to draw, there's a question in the chat, very interesting question.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, so Debbie, that's a very complex question. The regions there, so as I said, I'm still discovering the Punjab end of the story. So the drivers who were in the city who were driving, they're mostly from the rural areas of Punjab, right? I am not equipped to answer the economic condition generally about Punjab because that's not my area of research, but just based on talking to the drivers and talking to the folks in Punjab itself, it seems that the agricultural productivity is low, right? And Shashwati and Nida can also jump in because of land division and subdivision, where they're getting land is smaller and smaller. So the agricultural return is less, and so then the path outward is migration. The first group of people that I did talk with in 2000 when I went out and did my research, some of them also talked about the oppression of Sikhs in the 1980s in Punjab, where families were actually sending their boys. So Sikhs in India are also a minority. Were sending their young boys outside, meaning abroad, to avoid police harassment and police repression. So those two things pop into my mind immediately when thinking about what is motivating the rural population, particularly to leave. So the political turmoil in the 1980s, which was captured in the 2000 sample, and then as you know, I got to learn a little bit more, thinking about looking at how land division and subdivision and agricultural returns may also push that particular population into the migration streams as well. Shashwati can add.
So there is, yeah, there is also like sort of pressures because of the reducing water table and sort of the ravages of the Green Revolution. And then therefore sort of the cycle of indebtedness from the farmers. So there is a lot of sort of rural distress. I wouldn't, again, I'm not an expert on it, but this is just something one gathers from, sort of being around. And then, and recently there was like one of the largest and the longest protests in history, like happened, and it all started from Punjab. And sort of came out of this rural distress, where the government, for those who don't know, the government was, there's something called the government has, promises to buy produce at a fixed price to a farmer. So it's sort of a insurance that no matter what, if you're a farmer, you will get some money because the government's going to buy produce at a fixed, at a minimum price. So you're guaranteed some sort of solvency. And the government was tapping that and changing that around. And so a huge protest erupted, and it essentially was started from Punjab, which also sort of has an interesting history of sort of radical organizing and political movements. So it's very specific to the history, it's specific to the geography, and then of course specific to the political economy of Punjab. So I think all of these things kind of tie into the migration speak very much, but
and I think as Shashwati is talking,
they show up in different.
Sorry for interrupting, but I just that the farmers' issues that they're facing in India is something that the farmers here have actually already gone through. And for those of us who don't know, there is a high rate of farmer suicide in the United States. In fact, it shot up during COVID. And some of the discourse that I was reading in the newspapers that they don't have a minimum support price for the farmers here. So, the floor keeps going down and down, agro industry is taking over. So I think that talking about transcending boundaries and borders, it's quite fascinating. And in fact, there were 80 unions, American unions, that sent letters of support to the farmers movement that was going on for over a year, from 2020 June to like 21 November. So so it's pretty fascinating, actually, when we think about global conditions, economic conditions, and impact on various groups that seem disparate, but somehow connected in various ways.
One of our students has put something in the chat, a question. How do some people who have migrated to the US keep their cultures alive? I understand that after arriving in the US for some time, or even in any other country, one would slowly adopt to some of the practices of that country. So how do they keep their culture alive in a largely Western world, not only in themselves, but also in their children who've grown up in the US and have an American identity? Do they sort of lose their identity after being out of their home country for many years? Thanks, Eden. That's a great question.
So identities are constantly shifting and transforming, right? And I think one of the things that immigrants tend to do is fossilize culture, make it appear that it is static and doesn't move from the time that they have left, or their imagination of whatever that culture is at the time. And they transport that to their kids. So there can be a disjuncture between the diaspora culture and the culture of the place that the diaspora things connects to. So with the gurdwaras, when I have gone there, and the culture that is evolving in the diaspora responds to the larger culture of the society. So when I go to the gurdwaras, Sundays, most gurdwaras will have Punjabi classes, which is like they'll go church day, right? Because the dominant culture of the society is Christianity. So then Sunday school becomes what happens in the gurdwaras. And through that Punjabi class, what they're teaching is, and I'm going to put Sikhism within quotes, because it is a certain interpretation of Sikhism that happens. I am not knowledgeable about Sikhism, but just my superficial understanding of the culture and the religion, that they're not, they don't necessarily go together. So I think that culture is evolving. That culture is not the same as the one that the people think they are from, and that the culture in this new place interacts with the culture of the dominant culture of the place that people have moved to. And and there are certain things that the Sikh population groups, the Sikh Americans, do in the US. So for example, the memory of 1984 becomes a rallying point of 1984 is when the Indian government really went in and destroyed the Golden Temple, which is sort of the Vatican of for Sikhs. The oppression surrounding that has become a rallying point of memory also for the Sikh diaspora. I mean, if you want to read about it, there's the Sikh Research Organization, Sikh Research Institute. Their headquarters is in Jersey, actually, but go to the website, you can go to the Sikh Coalition. And there's a certain idea of Sikhism that is being perpetuated. So yeah, so I just want to leave it there because it's, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. So there's no easy answer to that question is what I'm saying. The culture isn't static, it's evolving, it's changing, and how it's changing depends on the group and what they're interpreting it to be and why it is that they're interpreting it to be that way based on where they are. That may be too vague, but it's the best I can do in a short time. So I don't know if Nida or Shashwati would want to expand on that.
I just want to add, because I have students in my class who have a heritage from somewhere else, and I think there is a very different experience between generations, the first generation and the generation born in America, and they have very different pulls, priorities. So yeah, it is a very, very complex question. It plays out in very, very different ways. It would also depend on the class location of the people in the US. So there are like multiple factors that affect. But yes, this is a very important actually question for us, even as teachers and researchers, and how to negotiate. So thanks for asking, Eden.
Are there other questions? I mean, I'd even like that to kind of go off on that. Yeah, I'll hold my thought because I think we will stray if I start that line of thinking. Ashley.
Okay. I have a very practical question that I'll save for at the end here. I'm just going to comment on one of the things that resonated as I'm teaching a course in immigration history. So we look historically at the different waves of immigrant groups and focusing on the big picture of, what were some of the push and pull factors and that sort of thing. So when you said at the beginning, there's no one story about immigration. All of my students in the class will research part of their own family history. And for some of them, some of them are the children of immigrants, right? And actually I have one student who does practice Sikhism. and he was showing me they had to do an artifact assignment, and he has a bracelet that he wears all the time. And he was explaining the meaning and the significance of the bracelet in his culture and as part of Sikhism. And it was so interesting to learn about that through him. And it was so nice to have his willingness to explain this and share this to the rest of the class who, nobody else knows it or has that connection to it. But we've, what we kind of, as we go through class, my students will see how certain things rhyme. And I think, Nida, you said you have students, I can't remember where you said they were from, but how they relate to this story, even though they're from a totally different place in the world, different culture, different religion, right? That there are certain ways that these stories rhyme with each other, even though when you look at each individual's specific reasons for migrating or reasons for staying, right? Whatever those might be, that it's very unique to each family and to each specific person. So I appreciate bringing that out. And it's so strange that it can be both of those things at the same time. That each story can be so unique, and then at the same time, they can also relate to each other so strongly, right? It seems like those two things couldn't be happening, and yet they do. And so, in my head, I'm thinking of how is that even possible, even though we can see how it is. I was wondering on a practical level, and then anybody can, expand on that or add whatever. I know it's not necessarily a question, but is this film, like if we wanted to show it in our classes or something like that, is this film accessible? Is it just available through that link? Can anybody watch it? Are there any, restrictions, regulations? That kind of thing was a question that I had.
I can answer to that, right? Like the idea behind getting the SDG Sustainable Development Goals funding is to make this open access. So all the work all the films that are going to come out of this project are going to be open access. We are in the process of creating a website where they'll all be hosted, so people across the world can use them in their classes. So like just getting over these paywalls and not having these to have the access part is very, very important in this project. And that's where it relates to the UN SDG goal of quality education that we wanted for everyone. And actually that you brought that up, and I wanted to also say that the beauty of these stories and these visual stories is that it's not only the immigrant students who relate to it. I have a lot of students from rural Minnesota, and for them, these are such alien bodies in a certain sense. But the stories, when they hear their stories, oh, this sounds like my mother's story, right? Born and always having lived in rural Minnesota. So there's something, it brings just the voices, and not just having a professor lecturing about India. I mean, just having these different voices are like magic, I think, in class. And that's why we want to share it with everyone and have them completely available. So I think if you want to go ahead and use this, I think we are still in the editing and we have a round of editing to do, but once it's ready, we can, Nidhi, you can just go ahead and share it before the website is even ready.
They're all going to be easily. They'll be all be available, and there'll be ways to sort of get them. So definitely there's no point in these if they don't get used.
No, and yes,
that's definitely.
That's great. But I think the key, in our theme of transcending divisions, and there's many, this always seems to come up, that there's so much benefit that can be made, and so much way that we can move beyond divisions when we're simply sharing stories about ourselves with others. I think that's, we see it over and over again, how it can be somebody who just on surface looking at somebody assumes that they have nothing in common with that person because, maybe they themselves are not an immigrant, or they're not from that area, or they practice a different religion, or they're in a different, part of the class structure, whatever it might be. But there are those things that we all can relate to, but those only come out by having these deliberate, intentional conversations. Otherwise, we just kind of, pass each other along the way, and those assumptions carry on. And I know the whole idea of assumptions came up in here and how we think we make, and we all do it, right? But then, so for me, I think it just affirms, like, as many times as we can open up opportunities to hear stories from other people and to share our own stories and engage in that kind of dialogue, it's always beneficial. It's never negative, and people always leave the experience feeling connected and in a positive, in a positive way, which is really important, I think, in the moment that we're in so many different ways.
Yeah, and in the moment that we're in, and the woman who in the rural areas, just a little backstory, Jasvinder, the one who was in the yellow scarf, her brother-in-law was actually shot dead in Arizona after 9/11. So that if you Google, it will come up at the gas station right after 9/11. So it's quite a well-known story. Actually, it was their gas station, and I think it was their gas station, right, Chashati? It was his own gas station.
Yeah.
He was the youngest brother in the family.
And Balbir Singh Tobey. I think there's a PBS documentary about it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we remember that story. Yeah. Oh, she was related. That was her brother-in-law. Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's her brother-in-law. That's her husband's brother.
Youngest one, I think, in the family.
That hits home so hard, right? Yeah.
I think it was the youngest.
I think we're almost out of time.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
DDT,
Great.
for suggesting this as part of our Transcending Divisions theme. And thank you for the incredible work that you have done with your partners, Shashwati and Nita. And we look forward to seeing additional short films and documentaries. We do have a YouTube playlist for our Global Citizenship Project, and it sounds like we will be able to post the recording of this program there, and we can always, in our classes, once your website is public and published, we'll be happy to share that out with our faculty who are very, very interested in continuing this conversation and learning more about how we can transcend these boundaries and relate and communicate and interact and connect with each other and engage with each other across boundaries. So thank you so very much for your time this afternoon, this evening, early morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I will stop the recording now.